Hey, welcome to another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty, real talk about cheating and the mind fuckery that goes with it. I'm your host, Tracy Shorn, otherwise known as Chump Lady. Alas, my co-host Sarah Gorel couldn't make it today, but we have a special guest, Nell Hudson, who proves my maxim that talent and beauty have absolutely nothing to do with being chumped. In fact, it's probably more likely because fuckwits choose well, and we'll discuss more on this later. Nell is an actor and a writer, and for those of us in the US, you might have seen her in hits like Outlander or Call the Midwife. Nell is a graduate of the Oxford School of Drama, and she is a published author. Her book, Just for Today, was published by Tinder Press in the summer of 2022, and she also writes a Substack newsletter, which you should totally check her out on, covering life, mental health, feminism, and culture. She's also a contributing editor to Sunday Girl magazine, and she'll shortly take over as the host of their monthly podcast. Welcome, Nell. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that lovely intro. I think that was my favorite intro that I've ever experienced.
Oh, well, may it be the first of many lovely intros, especially as you're taking up podcasting. I'm going to have to ask you about that.
I'm a huge fan of the podcast medium. I just think it's so great, isn't it? It's such a good way to get stuck into a topic.
It really is. And I have to thank Sarah for that, because when I met her, by a year and a half ago, she's the one who suggested voice as a medium, and that it's really a much more intimate way to get your message across. And, she converted me, and if it weren't for her bravery and pulling me into it, she's so professional at this, being a radio broadcaster.
I'm very grateful to her for pulling you into it, because you have so much humor as well in your voice that I can see it in your writing, but like you speaking, I get to really hear like the nuance and how funny you are.
Oh, thank you. When I listen to myself, I'm always like, I've got to stop cracking up, because this stuff is, we both crack each other up, especially our favorite episode is terrible cheater gifts. But even when people are telling the most horrific stories, I can't not find the mordant humor in it, because fuckers are narcissists and they're just so asinine. But when they're really powerful in your life, it doesn't feel that way, right? It feels like they're so important.
Totally.
Yeah. So
I'm the same. I laugh too. It's weird. Like the pain is real, but you kind of have to laugh because
yeah.
it's so absurd. It so stretches the imagination of what a person could be capable of. I think for me, it's almost like a continued shock. You know, when you laugh in shock, like I think it's the same part of your brain.
It is like it's the same thing that makes people like laugh at funerals. It's like you have to have that valve that just like lets go of all this overwhelming emotion and go for it. So before we hit the record button, I asked you how you had ever heard of the blog, and you told me a very funny story, which you have to tell our audience, because it just made me chuckle.
So I first discovered you from reading The New Yorker, and I was reading the book reviews at the back, and I was reading a book review of Sarah Manguso's book, which you have discussed on this podcast. And I saw that the writer of the review had mentioned you, Tracy, and had said that the kind of philosophy of your work that you were doing was that cheating should be treated as abuse. It was tantamount to abuse, if not is abuse itself. And for me, that just was like a light bulb moment. It hit me right in my heart, and I just felt incredibly seen. And I broke up with my fuckwit 5.5 years ago. And all of the different ways that he hurt me, I had never just put it so simply as it was just abuse. Like that was abuse.
Of course it was, yeah.
And that just really struck me. So that was how I found you.
Well, and I also have to preface this with, if anyone's not aware of it, the New Yorker review was very unfavorable to both Sarah Manguso and myself, and it was Parul Segal who wrote it, and she called me a subversive cartoonist who put terrible ideas inside Sarah Manguso's head. And so through that ridicule, we've met each other, and I think that's wonderful and kind of subversive. So I guess my work is done. So
Love it.
Thank you, New Yorker. It's great. And if Sarah Manguso is listening, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. And also, like, to someone who would write that, I just think, well, you're very lucky that it hasn't happened to you. If you can think that way about cheating, then God bless you. You've never been through it.
You're a much nicer person. I would not say God bless you. The people in the South would say bless your heart, which is an
That's your
American Southern way of saying
darling.
fuck you. I'm not that pleasant. But yeah, so tell me about your chum story. So for all what I know, the outlines of it is that you were with this guy for 8 years. So this was,
Yeah.
and you're a young woman, so you're what? This was in you wasted your 20s on this
I
fuckwit.
did my damn 20s. Yeah, I met him when I was 20 and left him when I was 28. So pretty much the decade of my 20s was
Yeah,
spent on this person, which is really frustrating, obviously,
yeah,
because 20s is such a seminal time in your life and one that you never get back. And now I wish I just spent them single, but
yeah.
you can't rewind the clock. So yeah, I was 20 when I met him. I had not the best history in my romantic life anyway. I was
Mhm.
so vulnerable, as I think is often the case, whether it's you're a single mum or you've been treated badly in the past or whatever it is. I think that these people have a radar for a certain type of vulnerability,
Mhm.
and it's like kryptonite. And for some reason, you're just perfect for each other, but you don't realize that it's perfect in this really toxic way. You just
Yeah.
think it's perfect in a romantic way. So I'd been in a relationship in my teens with someone who was kind of controlling and who had actually cheated on me. So I
Oh
first
no.
experienced being cheated on when I was a teenager
Yeah.
and knew how much that hurt. So when I met this person when I was 20, I kind of came to him with quite a sort of bandaged up heart and said, I've been through a lot of this shit before. Really, this means so much to me. Like, it's hard for me to trust. Please don't hurt me. And I'm a real heart on my sleeve person anyway. And he seemed to be just incredibly kind.
Hmm.
And everything felt like we were sort of meant to be together. It was quite love bombing, I suppose. And also I was 20 and he was
Yeah,
20.
you're
Also,
20. I mean, I just
yeah,
wanted to say, I think you're being a little hard on yourself, and because when we're all 20, nobody has a toolbox of relationship skills yet. We're all vulnerable. We're all kind of
yeah,
stupid. And I mean, when I think of myself, I got married to my first fuckwit when I was in my 20s, and I'm like, I didn't have a thought in my head, right? I was just like, I think your 20s are all about, hey, I've never done that before. That sounds good. Okay, sure.
yeah,
I mean, and
yeah,
that was kind of how I went through my 20s, and if you cross paths with a bad actor, with somebody who has the wrong intentions, it's very easy to get caught up in that. I mean, most people don't start their 20s, especially young women, the way we're culturated, to have really strong boundaries and to know what we want and to give ourselves permission to dump somebody who treats us
yeah,
wrong. We're just
totally.
supposed to be really nice and stuff. So don't, you weren't a particularly, I don't know, weak herd in the antelope or weak antelope in the herd.
Yeah,
You were just a 20-year-old girl. It's just how it
yeah.
is, or a young
I
woman.
suppose I suppose that yeah, no, definitely I agree with you. And we now know that your prefrontal cortex doesn't even finish developing till you're in your mid-20s. So
Yeah.
also literally your brain hasn't finished developing and your perception of consequence is not fully realized yet. It's kind of extraordinary actually that we treat these people like they're fully grown adults. And once you move out of that stage of your life, you look back and you're like, it's laughable because you're just a kid. You know what I mean? In so many ways, you're just a kid. But I mentioned the kind of, wounded antelope type things because I think I thought that by presenting myself so openly to him at the beginning, I was kind of saying, don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me.
Right.
This is my shit. Don't do it again.
You thought you could achieve consensus with a fuckwit, which is a rookie chump mistake we all
Yeah.
make. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't know he was a fuckboy at this point. And
Well, they don't present that way.
no, they sure don't. They sure don't.
How'd you
And
meet
yeah,
him?
how did I meet him? Oh God, it's not good. He
It's
was a
okay.
he was a musician
Yeah.
And now, obviously, I'm like, what did I expect? He was a musician. Like,
Well, he was sparkly, right? I mean, look.
he was a musician, and I went to a gig of his, and the funny thing is, I actually fancied the bassist in his band. I didn't fancy him. But the bassist had a girlfriend and wasn't a fuckwit and said, I'm sorry, I'm with someone, I'm not
Mhm.
interested. Uh, so yes. And then he was just there at the right place at the right time. And then we got to talking, and then one thing led to another, and we began seeing each other.
Yeah.
And he was the lead singer in a band, and I thought that was pretty cool. So,
That is when you're 20. That's like, yeah.
and now, I mean, if I was ever single again, I hope I'm not, but the last person I would date would be anyone in a band.
No offense to musicians out there, but yeah, they do.
No
It's
offense.
funny. Everybody thinks that certain professions have more fuckwits than others, and okay, well, yes,
It's to do with visibility, I guess. I guess we see it more when it's musicians because of the fame crossover, and same with actors, which
yeah. Well, you have to think a lot of yourself to get on stage and sing. So I'm not saying every singer is a fuckwit, of course
I
not,
know.
but you have a certain built-in confidence, I think.
Yes, I
But
agree.
but the one
That's
that
how
comes up on the blog a lot are academics and cops. So I don't know. That might be a challenge.
power.
Yeah, power or something. But I think or sinister ministers. I have a whole subcategory of
Oh,
Jesus
of course.
cheaters.
But
Yeah, but
that's
I
power too, isn't it? Don't you think?
yeah, of course. Yeah, and you're working with you're kind of you're working with vulnerable populations and people who have
Yeah.
big hearts and stuff. So, but in a certain way, I imagine with a musician, there's like a power dynamic of he's the star and you're the fan. But clearly, you're a star in your own right. I mean, this is the years
Yeah.
where you're like building your career and going to
Yeah.
school and stuff. How did he handle that? Was he jealous of your?
He was jealous. So when we met, I was still at drama school, and then I graduated, and then we moved in together in London and kind of embarked on our 20s together. We both moved to the big city, and we were both trying to make it in the arts. And, bit by bit, I started to do well with my acting career, and started to make good money, and started to sort of do some press and get my face out there. And I always remember he was really jealous of my Instagram.
Really?
He'd
How
be
so?
like, he would tease me and be like, as if, he'd be incredulous that I had so many followers. As in, and I would comfort him. It's so mad, isn't it? I'd comfort him. He'd be like, I'm just so upset because, you've got all these followers, and
Mm.
it's just for a show that you happen to be in. Whereas, I work so hard at my music, and I write all my own songs, and I try so hard, and the band's only got this many followers. And I would
Whoa,
kind of,
whoa, 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 stop here. It just so happens because it's a show that you just happen to be in, as
I
if
know,
that took like
nothing to do.
no effort or training or talent
Yeah,
or guts or anything.
yeah,
Yeah. So when good things happen to you, it's just happened to dance. It's just, but
yeah,
he is a sad sausage. He is the victim of people who don't sufficiently appreciate him.
totally.
That is a theme. That's a through line in every fuckwit story. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Love
that's a
hearing
red
it. We
flag.
call it the little helpless woodland creature narrative.
Oh, you've read the blog, so you know about the timid. Was he a
Oh,
timid forest
it's
creature?
so good. That's it. Timid forest creature. No accountability.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think he was quite threatened by that. And, in hindsight, I kind of looked at that as part of this. When I was trying to unpack the psychology of what he did to me, I partly chalked it up to, oh, well, I suppose he was really threatened by my success and potentially me overtaking him in that way. But now I don't think that at all. I think he was a narcissist, like a clinical narcissist. And I know you've said on this podcast, and I agree with you, that that term is far too easily bandied around. But I think in this case, he really is a clinical narcissist. So the Chump story is we were together for 8 years,
Hmm.
and and then it ended in an explosion because he was incredibly nice. I had a very nice, loving partner who was with me, who saw me through some tough times. So in my 20s, struggling with my mental health a bit, becoming an actress and suddenly being under that spotlight
Yeah.
through through me, and I got an eating disorder. And I got treatment for that eating disorder, and I got better. But that was something that I went through during our relationship. And yeah, I struggled with my mental health. It was tough. It was a really big change for me, going from kind of adjusting to adult life, and then also
Yeah.
adjusting to kind of a level of fame and a level of attention that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty common story. I mean, with young women
Yeah,
in the spotlight. I
yeah,
mean, how could it not be?
yeah.
You know?
And the kind of narrative while we were together up until we broke up was, wow, he's so lovely and supportive. And everyone around me would say, oh, you're so lucky, single friends who were struggling to quote unquote find a man would say, oh, you're so lucky you got one of the few good ones out there. There are so few good ones out there and you've got a good one. And his whole shtick was what a lovely person he was.
Mm.
So when we broke up, it was just such a shock. Basically, we literally went out for dinner on I think it was a Wednesday night in 2019, May 2019. We went out for dinner to celebrate our 8-year anniversary. It was the night of our anniversary.
Hmm.
Wednesday night. We both put up posts on our Instagram of each other saying, happy anniversary, I love you so much, can't believe it's been 8 years, words to that effect. And then the next morning, he went, ironically, to therapy.
Oh my, was this a new
He had
hobby for
recently
him?
he had recently started seeing a therapist, and I, as a proselytizer of therapy, was thrilled. I'd been saying for
Yeah.
years, you should really go. I've been, it's great. Everyone should go. I still say this.
Yeah.
And so I had thought nothing of it. I didn't see it as a red flag. I saw it as a green flag. If anything, I thought, great, he's doing that. He's growing up. We were
Yeah.
28 at this point. I thought we were going to get married. We talked about getting married. We always said, we met when we were 20, we'll get married when we're 30. And at that point, we'll have been together for a decade. You can't argue with that. Like that's what we're going to do, kind of thing. So the next morning he went out to therapy. It was about 9 a.m. I was in my flat that I owned with my money from that show I happened to get into. And that he got to live in for, I think,
Oh
all
God,
the
no.
money
Oh,
full.
you got
I saw a
finished.
meme the other day, which was no one falls in love faster than a narcissist who needs a place to live.
Yes. Or all you've heard the term hobosexual, right?
Oh my God, that's so good. No, I haven't. I haven't
No,
heard.
oh yeah. It's the fuckwit who needs a place to live. Yeah. That
Amen.
sounds so classic, right?
Yeah. So that's where we were living, and I was in the flat and he was at therapy. And my phone rang, and it was my cousin. And my cousin said, I'm really sorry, I don't know how to tell you this, but I just saw both of your Instagram posts and I can't not say anything. And I know two different girls that your boyfriend is shagging.
Your cousin
And
told you this. And how did your cousin, he knew from Instagram or the
so
people that
my
were,
cousin knew one of the girls.
okay.
And the story is that these two girls that he knew about happened to be friends. And one day they went for coffee, and one of them said to the other, how are you, babe? And the girl said, I'm okay. I really like this guy that I'm seeing, but he's got this girlfriend. He says he's going to leave her, but I don't know. And then she said, how are
Oh,
you? And then the other friend said, oh my God, I'm in the same situation. And then it turned out they were talking about the same man. And
oh
that
my God.
was my boyfriend, who I had been with for 8 years and had lived with for 5 years and had a dog with. They were talking about him.
Him.
And they went, oh my God, we're talking about the same person. And they realized at that point, oh, help, something's wrong.
And they didn't tell you. They
They
didn't
didn't
take,
tell me. The one who knew my cousin went to my cousin and said, you're Nell's cousin, aren't you? I think maybe you should tell her that this has happened. And that's how I found out, was through my cousin. And then so that happened on the Thursday morning,
oh my God.
the day after the anniversary that happened. So I literally went from 8 years, happy, 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 you're the love of my life, to the next morning, I think my relationship is ending. I didn't know what, at this point, I was like, well, we'll go to couples counseling and we
Hmm.
can figure it out probably. And, we've been together a long time. We've spent our 20s together. He's been on tour with his band. I've been away a lot filming. Kind of, it's not the end of the world if he's
Yeah.
just fucked up once or twice. We can deal with it. So I got in my car, still in my pajamas and barefoot, and I just drove to his therapist's office.
Hmm.
And I will never forget, I caught sight of my face in the rear view mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. I'd gone white as a sheet. I was like, holy fuck, who's that? I'd changed color. I looked like a
Yeah, no,
big,
you're completely in, it's just trauma and shock, right?
it
I
was
mean,
such shock. And I
yeah.
thought, okay, I'm gonna just tell him that I know. and we'll have to figure it out and we'll have to work on it. And I picked him up from his therapy and he got in the car, and I had picked up some cigarettes on my way, and I hadn't smoked for many, many years, but at this point I needed a fucking cigarette.
Yeah.
And and I smoked a cigarette. I pulled over and I smoked a cigarette, and I said, I know about this person and this person. And he went into lying straight away and said that one of them, well, he did the classic story, which is both of those girls are in love with me and they want to sabotage our relationship because they want me. That line.
Right. So
And
to perform the pick me dance from the wonderfulness that is me.
yes,
Both, it's the bitch be crazy. Bitches be crazy. They
this
both
is
of them.
crazy,
Both of
which
them don't know what they're talking about. They
is
just your cousin doesn't know what he's talking about. Where I thought the story was going is when you're on a public platform and you're both kind of public figures, I'm surprised nobody ratted him out in the comments. Like,
well, this
or he
was the other
deleted them
thing,
or
is that
something.
like
I don't know.
that I almost thought that was kind of a shield, because I thought like I'm not, I didn't see myself ever as sort of famous or anything, but I thought, well, I'm well known enough and our relationship is public enough. We weren't one of these couples that like is kind of quiet about the fact that they're together for their public profile or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I was and still am to this day like really open about my personal life with my social media, because I don't know any other way to be. I'm
Yeah.
a real open book, and I would share about our relationship and he would too. So I
Yeah.
sort of thought it's very clear this person has a long-term partner. This isn't like,
Well, as you found out, there are people
yeah,
who have the morals of alley cats or whatever, and they don't care,
they
and
don't, yeah,
they don't care, but they also don't care enough to tell you, which
yeah.
is risking your sexual health, which we'll get to in a moment. But I'm just kind of curious, as a feminist, what do you think? Have you sort of rethought your views on infidelity and what these two women's roles in it were? I mean, they were okay that to kind of collude in your abuse is the way I see it, you
Yeah,
know?
I totally hear you. I think it's such an interesting question, because I think the Venn diagram between feminism and infidelity has an absolutely massive overlap,
Hmm.
in terms of like the kind of cultural issues that we're talking about. I think
Yeah.
you can't talk about one thing without talking about the other. What I will say, it gets a lot more complicated with both of these girls, but what I will say is that one of them was 17 when he met
Oh,
her,
yeah.
and
So he's lying to them too.
he's lying to them too. And
Right.
my instinct to begin with was, well, it's not their fault.
Sure.
My default line is it's the guy, right? It's or in some cases the woman, but more often than not, blame the cheater. You can't blame the other person. You've got to blame the cheater. And I think there's a point, which I will get to because it happens, where you start to look at the other person and go, oh, well, hang on.
Yeah.
You have a lot of accountability here, but mostly my rule is like, don't blame the other woman, blame the cheater, because
Yeah.
that's the real bad guy. And I think it's too common a mistake that we go after the other woman, isn't it? That we go,
Well,
oh,
I think that's true, but I also think I do think I joke that, or maybe not joke, but I say other women suck the dick of the patriarchy.
yeah,
And
no, I've heard you say
what
that.
I would get to is however old they are also believing internalized some misogyny and believing a
Yeah,
very toxic thing, which is that it's okay to compete for a man because they're so very special and they're so important that I can knock this girlfriend out of the arena, even though she's not gone yet,
yeah,
and that'll make me special, and that's a prize worth having. And I
so,
think as human beings, as feminists, whatever, we should totally examine those values that fuckwits are not worth having, and that anybody who's conducting a double life and whatever your makeup are, these women knew that he was lying to you or leading you along. I'm going to break up with her eventually, right? But they know that there's somebody in the orbit, and I think I wish women would not think that I'm so special I can win him.
totally. Or like, oh, he must be quite unhappy and I'm really hot and it must be so boring for him being in that shit relationship, but we just can't resist each other. And they're somehow just so sexy. Like it's just so sexy.
Yeah, so
I
edgy.
completely agree with you when you say that the other women are sucking the dick of the patriarchy. Amen. Like 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And on the note of sex, you know, the other thing that made me just not think anything was awry was we was having sex all the fucking time. Like we were still in our 20s.
Sure. Yeah.
We were having sex all the time. And I later learned that one of the days that he cheated on me, which was a Sunday, he had gone out and said, "Oh my God, we'd meant to spend the day together." It was during a time that I was busy filming and I wasn't around that much, but I was around at weekends, and we had marked out this Sunday where we were going to have like a really nice Sunday, go for a walk on Hampstead Heath and have a pub lunch and all this stuff. And he woke up in the morning and went, "Oh my God, I'm meant to be working with this video editor today. They'd had a music video and it was meant to be being edited. But I'm really sorry, I've got to go do this." And off he went. And then he came back that evening, and that night we had sex, and he slept in the bed next to me and cuddled me and said he loved me, etc., etc. And I later learned that that day he had gone out and fucked someone.
Yeah.
And like,
It's the worst. Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I'm just like, as if it was like a day job, like a little appointment that he had to keep.
Right.
It's extraordinary. And so yeah, so because we were still so like, you know, we were still physically intimate together all the time, that hadn't gone.
Hmm.
You know, to be the other woman when you're 28, and it's just so like gobsmacking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of the damaging myths, like, oh well, did you let yourself go? And
Right. Yeah. It's your fault somehow.
not
You know?
true in any way.
Right.
It's nothing. It's just nothing to do with you, and you know, it had
Right.
nothing.
And you, most people who aren't disordered don't imagine that their partners have double lives. I mean, like completely double lives.
Yeah,
And double lives are abusive. And I don't know
yeah.
why more people don't say that because it is an obvious truth, right? To be able to conduct yourself with that level of deception. I mean, it's not just one, it's two. And my
Oh wait, oh, it's not just
chump lady
two.
brain is probably there's at a zero. I mean, it's
Yeah,
probably the
no,
whole
so I
year.
found out about those two on this Thursday, right? The day after, we're in the car, I'm having the cigarette, and I say I know about these two. What he told me then was one of them nothing's ever happened with. There's just been a flirty dynamic, and she's annoyed. And one of them I snogged her once. That's what he said at this
Mm.
point. Over the next 24 hours, like we drove home and we just talked and talked and talked. And over time, like over the hours, as the hours passed, I kept realizing more and more things. And I kept cornering him and asking questions and realizing shit for myself that meant that he slowly, slowly had to, because I cornered him, admit more things. And he spent one final night in my house, which he slept. I made him sleep on the sofa, but it was the final night we ever slept under the same roof. Literally the night after our 8-year anniversary. And I stayed up all night. I couldn't sleep, obviously. And I kept having realizations in the night about things. And in the morning, I said, okay, I'm going to go to my parents and I'm going to be there for 2 or 3 nights. When I get back, you need to be gone and all your stuff needs to be gone. I never want to see you again.
Good for
Because
you. Well done.
I just like in my gut, I was like, oh, this is a lot. This is more. And then when I went to my parents for the weekend, I asked my cousin for the details of that girl, and I spoke through him actually to those girls, and I said I need info so that I have truth, because he's lying.
Yeah.
He's lying, so I need truth. And I just felt so crazy. And they told me some things that he hadn't admitted to. So then I took those back to him and eventually got slowly more confessions out of him and more things. And over the course of about a week, I got the number through hounding him and trapping him. I got the number up to 8.
God.
That's what I know about. I know
Yeah.
about, since we've broken up. We broke up 5 years ago. I found out about 3 more. So we're
Hmm.
now at 11. And like you said, add a 0. Like it will be, I don't know how many there will be. And the most recent one who randomly got in touch with me was last year, and she slid into my DMs on Instagram and was just quite weird with me and odd, and I ended up just blocking her because I don't want to know. Like if anyone's
Yeah.
listening to this and he fucked my boyfriend, I don't want to know.
Right.
I don't care
Get
anything.
yourself tested, man. Get yourself tested.
Get yourself tested because he
Dick has
gave me
wandered.
something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want
Yeah.
to know.
I'm,
But
I'm so,
it was a double life. It was a complete double life, and it was just such a shock. And one of the many things that I've had to grieve was having a proper breakup, because a proper
yeah.
breakup is a beautiful thing and a psychologically not satisfying, that's too strong a word, but like healthy thing to go through. You can do it, you know, when you do the breakup and you part ways and you divide your stuff and you cry and you hug and maybe you hook up once and all this stuff that is like the natural fallout of a relationship. But when you literally go from happy 8-year anniversary to I never want to see you ever again,
You had a D-Day.
literally,
Can I just say something as a subversive cartoonist here?
yeah,
I think you had a beautiful breakup. From my point of view, is his double life was revealed,
yeah,
and you threw the bum out. His shit
yeah,
was on the sidewalk. He had to get out.
yeah,
That's in my world, that's a beautiful breakup. What you didn't do, which hundreds of thousands of people do, which is why I have a blog and I'm still doing it, is
yeah,
you didn't ask yourself what you did to make him cheat. You had one, he had one come to Jesus moment and he lied to you. Like he trickled truth, as I said.
yeah,
He gave you this, he
yeah.
gave you that. I think you handled everything remarkably well. You didn't pick me dance. You didn't hang in there. You didn't go to reconciliation therapy with him. You didn't buy some stupid book that like told you that you should open up your relationship and be sexier or whatever. You threw him out. So
Yeah.
beautiful breakup, not not the kind of friends with exes bonhomie that we are supposed to aspire to, but in
Yeah.
my world, you were mighty. You, which is what we're about, that well done. We're applauding you.
Thank you.
Like,
No, I mean, I don't regret. I mean, I regret nothing about how I handled it. It's just that I got into a, you know, quite reboundy relationship. I mean, I did love the next boyfriend that I was with, but it was inevitably just a bit, you know, um, there were issues left over from what I'd just been through.
yeah,
And
I mean, maybe it was
then
too soon or whatever.
yeah, it was too soon. We were together for about a year and a half, and then we broke up. And then when I went through that breakup, it was like a double grief because that was a healthy breakup and I got to kind of grieve it and feel sad and move on. And then I also grieved during that breakup, the grief that I couldn't grieve because the last one had just been this like, it'd been like a death. It was like a death. My
Yeah.
brain had to go, he's dead. He's just dead. He's dead to me.
Well, I
Um,
think what you're underscoring is that there are healthy, ethical ways to break up with somebody, and you
yeah,
had one of those, and you
yeah,
can't have a healthy breakup with an unethical person who treated you where there's abuse. I mean, there's just get the person out of your life.
yeah,
There is not closure, and
totally.
I think closure is often a myth. There's just,
I
I
hear
mean,
you.
I'm not saying it didn't, to do what you did, it still hurts like a motherfucker. I mean, you still have to clean up the carnage, but at least he's not still in your life trying to abuse you and mind fuck you. And, no contact is the fastest way to heal.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I preach this to anyone going through any kind of breakup
Yeah.
is just don't get into the weeds in any way. It's tricky because so what was tricky, and you know, I really get this for anyone who's going through this now. Someone asked me the other day, a really good friend of mine asked me whether it was satisfying that this man didn't want to break up with me. He didn't want to break up.
Mm.
So when I said like it's over, we're done, blah blah blah, he obviously
Yeah.
didn't want that because he had a roof over his head for one thing.
Yeah, right. Of course he
Like
didn't want to break up. You were of
like the
use to
only
him.
yeah, he wanted to have his
That's
cake
not
and eat it. And
flattering.
no. But he and for you know for however long, a year or 2 years, he would still get in touch with me in any way. So I blocked his number on my phone so he
Good.
couldn't text me. But sometimes I have to check my junk. You know when you have to check your junk in case something's
Yeah.
gone into your junk. And I would see, oh, in my junk, because I blocked his email too, there's an email from him. So I would get these odd emails from him. He did show up at my house a couple of times
Ugh.
and did send a couple of postcards. Um, but
I'm sorry for laughing. A postcard, really?
well, because it's like it's the vanity of the postcard, you know, that Taylor Swift song where she's like, who uses a typewriter anyway? I was just like, God, that has to be about a musician. You know, that's about a musician because of these like pretensions that they bothered to
You
keep
got a
up. And
typewritten postcard. Okay.
yeah,
I forgive
um,
my cynicism, but I'm also thinking there's a bunch of women in the London Metroplex who are also getting typewritten postcards who
God,
think he's deep. It's just like one of the tricks
I
in
know,
his book, right?
but because he was still what's the word? He was still professing love to me. He would still say, "I
Yeah.
love you. be with you. I miss our dog. I miss this, that, and the other.
I miss you
And
paying the bills. I miss the sofa.
I, totally. And I, for the most part, ignored him, I think. Um, but I get that, like, for your ego, having someone still chase you, even if it is for
Mhm.
you paying the bills on the sofa, helps because you don't also feel rejected. Like, I think the worst thing that can happen is if you find out they've been cheating on you and then you dump them and they go, well, I don't really care anyway because I prefer my other woman to you and screw you and fuck you. Do you know what I mean?
I
Like,
disagree with you. I
really?
think, yeah, I do.
In
Because I
that.
think that um, I'm done with you, I'm moving on to the next woman is honest. It's honest. I mean,
Or
it's like
maybe,
the parasite going, I can't suck any more blood here. I got to move on to a new host.
yeah,
That's honest. What
yeah,
you're getting is very dangerous, in my opinion. It's
yeah,
because he's hoovering and he's trying to entrap you again. Um, and,
yeah,
and when you really look at it through the lens of abuse, is if you went back to him, he's just going to he's going to ramp it up. He's going to make it harder. He's going to tear down your self-esteem more. It's not, and this is another one of these, I think as feminists, as human beings, that we have to dismantle this, is that when somebody abuses you and then they come back, oh, but I still really love you. Fuck that shit. That's not flattering. That's not an ego trip. That
yeah,
person, all he's saying is, you're still of use to me, Nell. I can still use you.
yeah,
I still want to abuse you. It's like, come here
yeah,
closer so I can slap you.
yeah,
That's the truth of what he's doing. But we have such a romantic narrative that's attractive, that he didn't reject me. I'm like, if a fuckwit rejects you, good. You're too good
yeah,
for a fuckwit. I don't care if a
yeah,
fuckwit rejects you. You don't
yeah,
have the same values as
yeah.
that person. So
I
his
think
attention is not anything valuable.
no, it's not anything valuable. I think also for him, the reason that he continued to sort of pursue me was to do with I think his thing, which is narcissism, is about this image of himself as I'm a really good guy. I'm a good guy.
Sure.
And and
He
that would
needs
mean
you for
like,
that.
yeah, and therefore he had to just be, oh, I'm so heartbroken and I miss you and we should be together, as opposed to, well, yeah, I have been cheating and now I'm gonna go cheat and have fun, because then he's a bad guy and he's the asshole. So I think that his
Is he
self
apologizing or he just misses you? Because that's all about
no,
him.
he barely apologized,
Yeah,
barely.
right.
That
Well,
was
there
one
you
of the
go.
main things that I was like, where are the apologies? It was so odd. But
Is he
no,
going
so
to pay you 8 years of rent? That's the way my mind works. I'm like, sorry is as sorry does. Are you sorry that you used me? Why don't you pay me 8 years of rent? You know,
literally,
that would go a long way to conveying your apology.
yeah.
If he's not doing that, then I'm like, I'm
No,
sorry.
totally, totally. But because he was pursuing me, I later, so later, I didn't want to know anything about his life. I blocked him on social media. I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I just didn't want to know. And I said to everyone around me, please don't tell me anything about him. I don't want to know what he's up to.
Good
I
for
don't
you.
want to know who he's dating. I don't want to know where he's living. Just let's not talk about him. I didn't want to know. And then for some reason, a while, a year and a half or something after we broke up, I can't remember why, but it did come to my attention that he was now dating one of the original girls who had come to me and said,
Hmm.
I'm your boyfriend. That was who his girlfriend was now. And I thought, you fucking idiot. You weren't even the only one at the time.
You're right.
The reason
But
that I
she
found
believes the
out,
myth that she's special, that she can
yeah,
tame him. That is so deep.
literally.
Yeah.
And I was like, you weren't literally the reason the whole thing blew up in the first place. The
Hmm.
reason you got caught is because you two found each other. You two girls found each other. So you weren't even the only one
Yeah.
at part one of this story. And since then, there have been 11 other parts of this story.
Right.
Like, how could you possibly be that stupid? Anyway, I found
Because
out that
she's that special. She thinks she's that special. He's that good at love bombing.
oh,
And because these women write to me every day, I'm telling you,
yeah.
and I run the other women letters, she'll get cheated. She's going to have her D-Day.
Oh, he already has. Like, I know he already has.
Yeah.
I have,
And
I
she's
have.
going to be horrified. And she's going to be horrified. She
I,
needs a few more kicks in the teeth, and then she's going to figure out
yeah.
that
Well, I'm
nobody
not.
is special to these people.
No,
No one. No one's
no.
special.
I'm sure that I will hear from her and I will ignore her at some
Good.
point. At some point in my future, I know that I will get a letter from her or whatever saying it's happened to me too, and at which point I will ignore her.
I think you're a
Um,
very good person because a lot of people would be like, ha ha ha. Like, like this does not end
that
well for
might have been a
you.
while back, but I'm now just like, well, yeah, duh, like obviously that's gonna
Oh my
happen.
God.
But
Well,
yeah, so when I found out he was going out with her, it was only about a week after his last email in my junk folder that had said, I love you, I miss you, I want you back. And I, at this point, in madness, I now see that this was madness, but I just thought, I don't want to be the other woman. And he's kind of making me the other woman
mhm,
because he's still professing love for me, and I'm not going to be complicit. I don't want complicity. This is not cool. So I sent her a text message and I said, do with this what you will. Marry him if you want to. I don't care. But this is the facts, just so you know.
mhm.
Literally last week, got an email. He says he still loves me. So do with that what you will. If I don't care. And I never heard from her. And as far as I know, they're still together. But that was the one time that
Mhm.
I thought, well, I'll just let her know because I want my side of the street clean. I don't want
Sure.
to be anyone's other woman. Um, and yeah, and I mean, whatever, like it, all the different.
Look, she's,
It makes
I'm
no
sure
difference.
he's saying you're crazy.
Maybe.
The same message. You're crazy. You're hung up on
Exactly.
him. I mean, if it makes you feel any better, when I was going through my crazy D days with my cheater, and I was broken up with him or separated because we were married, um, I found his profile on Match.com and I sent it to the main other woman. There were other women, but there was one that went back 20 years of a double life, like, the one who hung on the longest. And I
Yeah.
sent her the link to the profile. It wasn't even like me going, and I think the title was, Hey, your boyfriend's on Match. Um, and she sent me like a cease and desist letter, right? I'd really offended her. I mean, there's no piercing that
It's
crazy.
so extraordinary, isn't it? It's
No,
extraordinary.
there isn't. And okay, so years later, like I'm divorced from him. I'm moving to Texas with my husband. I some oh, my neighbor reached out to me, sent me this profile on one of the, I don't know, I think it's called Cheaterville. It's like one of these outed cheater sites, which nobody should participate in, by the way. They're scams. But anyway, some other chump of his had posted on there, and it was still the same woman. I mean, we're talking years later. So even after that, and he'd moved, I mean, she was still caught up in all that psychodrama. And you are blessed to be out of the psychodrama and to have called him on his shit and had firm boundaries. Well
Yeah.
done. I mean, do you look back and kind of see the red flags? That was our we did a recent podcast on red flags. When we first connected, you kind of left us this message. It was this humdinger of gaslighting. It takes a lot to shock me. I'm pretty unshockable, but this one
Yeah.
really shocked me. Can you-
I'm glad that I feel vindicated that it
Oh,
shocked
you were
you.
vindicated. Like this is in the pantheon of mindfuckery.
So it wasn't until after we broke up that I then realized quite how badly he had gaslit me. And this happened a year before we broke up, so I suppose it was nearing the end. Really, I don't know how I'd have reacted if this had happened earlier in the relationship, but
Mhm.
about a year before we broke up, I noticed that I had some symptoms
Sure.
down there, and I immediately, you know, diagnosed myself and thought, right, well, my boyfriend's cheated on me because I haven't slept with anyone else and I've got something wrong. And so I immediately tried to get in touch with him and got hold of him. And I said, look, something's happening. Have you slept with someone else? And he obviously said, no, have you slept with someone else? So
Oh
immediately,
God. Yeah.
it must have come from your end. And I
Hmm.
obviously assured him that I hadn't. And I was away that weekend for a job, and I said, look, we'll talk about it when I get back to London. And when I got back to London, he had obviously, I now know, cooked up what he was going to say, his little plan. Actually, maybe he hadn't. Anyway, I got back to London and I was saying, look, you must have cheated on me. This doesn't happen in a vacuum, and I haven't done anything, and something's wrong. So this has
Mhm.
got to have come from you. And he was like, no, it hasn't. Like, are you sure? Like, you couldn't have got it years ago, but it's been like dormant in your system and it's just bubbled up now and all these things. And I was like, no, like, I don't think so. But like, I loved him and I trusted him and I'd been with him for 7 years at this point.
Yeah.
thought I was going to marry the guy, and I was just racking my brains like, really, no, like I don't think so, and it couldn't be. And then I said, to be honest with you, I told him this. I said, to be honest with you, I haven't been eating that much lately. I've been going through a bit of a relapse with my eating disorder because I'm really stressed and I'm worried about X, Y, and Z, and I've not been looking after myself that well. And I'm, and I think I was saying it to be like, I'm sorry that I'm stressy kind of thing, like I'm not looking after myself. And then he went, oh my God, that's what it is. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, that's what's causing your symptoms. Like it's your eating disorder because
Fuck him.
because you're back in your eating disorder. You've given yourself these symptoms because your immune system's down, and this is why, and you've brought it upon yourself from your eating disorder, basically. And I kind of swallowed it at the time.
No, it's so, I mean, it's just evil. It's just like it's just like next level. I mean, you're presenting him with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And he has to weaponize that vulnerability and turn it on you and make you the bad guy, even though he has harmed you.
Yeah.
Harmed your health.
Totally.
And yeah.
Totally.
I mean,
it's another area wherein this is a feminist issue, because many STIs are much more dangerous for women than they are for men.
of course, yeah.
And can cause infertility and cancer, whereas for men they can go completely like symptom free and actually quite harm free.
I've told people, when people, try to kind of downplay, oh, cheating, no big deal, you're puritanical, whatever. I'm like, well, for men, okay, how jolly is it to paternity test your children if you think being cheated on is something light? But for women, I can't tell you how many letters I've gotten from women who discovered STDs in prenatal screenings for their pregnancies.
I've heard on it makes me, I literally have been listening to your podcast and crying, like rage crying, when I hear about miscarriage and STIs at prenatal screening.
Ovarian cancer. I mean, we've had people.
My mum. This is the other thing. When I did the dates and checked through everything, one of the other opportunities he took to cheat on me in my flat that he lived in my bed, was when my mum was having chemotherapy and I went home to look after her. So I was away. He used that opportunity while my mum could have died from having cervical cancer related to the STI that he gave me.
Oh, fuck him.
He used the opportunity to bring a girl into my bed. And it's just like, that's evil. And I mean,
totally evil. Yeah.
The stories that I've heard on your podcast, but I'm like, these people should be in fucking prison. If you are making someone miscarry because you've cheated on them and you've been through fertility issues, if you are endangering someone's health, how is there not,
how is it not abuse? Right.
This is abuse, and society should treat it very, very differently to how it's treated.
Yeah.
And really
I was interested to read that you write a column, Sunday Girl, and you're doing a podcast. So I'm assuming this is geared towards young women. Are you hoping to kind of change the views for the next generation? Tell me about how you want to change the narrative on this, because I'm excited that you are willing to talk so openly and publicly about what happened to you.
Well, I think it's really important, and I'm so glad that I found your podcast, because I'm so grateful that you are talking about it as well.
And Sarah,
and Sarah, sorry, it's because I've got you in front of me, but yes, and Sarah, thank you, Sarah, so much. I think that, like you said, that there is this just incredible myth about pick me and about the patriarchy, and it's done this huge number on us, and that we're different and we're special if a guy wants you, even if he's got a partner or a wife. And that's a massive, massive lie, and it's incredibly damaging to people, and it's damaging to society. And I don't know, I think it might just be really selfish of me, but it want of a better term, and sorry that I swear so much, but it fucked me up. It really, really fucked me up in a big, big way, what happened to me. And I don't want anyone to go through that. And when I hear the stories of people on your podcast and, what you've been through, what Sarah's been through, I'm just, I mean, and also I'm just an angry feminist. And to me, this is a big crossover with feminism in general, that I'm like, well, this is once again a feminist issue, and people don't care. When you tell people that you've been cheated on, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I don't know if it's because it's embarrassing and there's
Mhm.
the stigma is that it's private. No, we don't share that sort of thing. Or if it's, and I suspect this is also true, because everyone fucking hates women and anything to do with women, if you talk about it, people don't really care because you can talk about sexual abuse or, uh, a number of whether woman is a victim, people don't really care. Like people just do the level of sympathy that people feel for you. Like I honestly, I used to say to people, I think people would be more shocked if I said that my ex had like kicked my dog or like hurt our dog.
Sure. Right.
I think
Well,
I'd get more sympathy if I went around being like, it turned out that my ex was hitting our dog. I think people would go, no, oh my God. And when I tell them that he cheated on me, people are like, oh shit, I'm really sorry. And I can feel that the blame is on me. I can feel it.
sure. Well, I think part of, I mean, I have written about this a lot, but I think part of it is that we don't see infidelity as abuse. We don't see it as transgressive. We
Yeah.
imagine that, well, maybe we would want to be special. Maybe we would step out. I mean, it's something, I think double lives. When we say like I've been cheated on, I think a much more effective way to kind of slap someone up the head to really see that it's abuse, just to go, I found out my boyfriend had a double life. That's not
Yeah.
about you being cheated on.
Yeah.
That's about him having a double life. That's
Yeah.
why I fight euphemisms. I mean, a lot of for people who've been married who get on, I call the reconciliation industrial complex. In those sites, they refer to cheaters as wayward. They're
Yeah.
wayward. They lost their way. They drifted into a snowbank and they need their address and they need to find a way home. They don't know what they do. And I'm like, no, just say cheater. That's what they did. And just call a thing a thing.
Yeah.
I think we just have to clean up our language about this, and we just have to be really. So
And I
say
think
double life, and like,
I
no,
think also
he
like
had a double life.
he had a double life. I think you're right. I think that's what I will say if I ever talk about it again.
You don't have to talk about it again, but I think it's really great that. Well, okay, you. I know it had big repercussions on your life. I don't think anybody. I think we survive and we get through it, and it makes you stronger, and it makes you more discerning.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you have a pretty great gain of life story. Can you tell us a little about what you're doing now and
Yes, I
how
do.
it all worked out for you?
I am now very happily engaged to a lovely new partner. Um, and we live together. We're getting married next year.
Yay!
Uh, Max, he's such, so I got my dog Maggie, who Tracy can see is in the background of my
He's
Zoom screen.
adorable.
She's begging me to go for a walk. I'm sorry, we'll go for a walk soon. I got Maggie with the guy, the bad guy, when she was just a puppy. And do you know, I listened to your podcast and my mother said this to me. She said, thank God you didn't have a child with that man. Thank
Yeah.
God, because I hear these stories about having to shield children from the truth about who their fathers really are, and sometimes mothers. And I'm in awe of anyone who can do that, who can protect their child from the truth out of love for the child. But inevitably, it sort of means that the 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 perpetrator, the fuckwit, kind of gets away with it to some
Oh, I
extent.
tell people to tell in age
Tell
appropriate
their
ways.
kids. And
Yeah,
age
it's not
yeah,
okay to gaslight children, even with the
yeah,
best of intentions. But you
yeah.
can't editorialize. You can't go, "Mom's a whore" or "Dad's a fuckwit." You just
Sure.
say, "Hey,
This
when
is
I mean, this is the way I explained it to my 8-year-old son. I'm like, hey, when you get married, you promise to be each other's special person, and this person lied, and you know how you feel when someone lies to you, and they kind of broke the rules, and there's consequences, and I had to make this decision. I think otherwise, if we teach children that there's just people fall out of love or whatever it is,
yeah,
it's like this nebulous cloud. We don't, everybody understands actions and consequences, but they don't understand nebulous cheater speak. Like one day, I just fell out of love. I don't know what happened. This cloud descended over my life, and I like walked out on my wife and 3 children. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. Are you going to think, oh my God, I'm going to love somebody someday and the cloud's going to descend on them and they're
yeah,
just going to walk out for somebody? No, tell them the truth. The other thing, I mean, going on a whole tangent here, but the other thing about cheating in children is that it's so common that fuckwits enlist children in affairs, that these children have
Oh,
already been introduced to affair partners, or they're carrying secrets, terrible secrets that they know and the chump parent doesn't know.
yeah,
And
of
that when
course.
you're honest, you've relieved them of that burden.
Yeah.
And as a chump, this is hard. You have to step out of the way and you have to let your kid have their own relationship with that parent because it's primal. They're going to love their fuckwit and it hurts, but you got to get out of it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other, I'm actually trying to finish the second book about this very issue about co-parenting with fuckwits, but
Wow.
it's a really hard, so thank God you're not in that situation and you have this
Yeah.
beautiful new beginning with, did you
Yeah.
vet Max? We had like the tribunals have he's been
I said I'm gonna. I did actually. I said I'm gonna consult the coven, in, the two best friends and my mom, and everyone approves. And that was the funny other thing with the bad guy, the fuckwit, was that like as much as everyone got on with him, there was a lot of people who came out after we broke up and said I always thought there was something funny about him,
Oh, good.
which
Yeah.
was double gaslighting in a way because I was like, oh, what now? You tell me, and it really messed with me actually for a while, but on another level, it's a litmus test. And when I met Max, everyone was like, no, straight up, like good person. Like
Yeah.
we would say at this point
We
if there
like
were
this guy.
anything felt fishy, and everyone loves him and everyone gets on with him and he gets on with everyone. So
Uh,
that's
would you
but
be honest with somebody if you were in the coven and they were bringing you a guy forward? And if you saw red flags, would you say,
yeah, I do. Oh, I am a full proponent, which I think you are as well, of like very radical honesty about anything sinister with men. So like
Mhm.
people often ask that question of like, oh, if you saw someone's partner out with another person, would you tell them? And I'm like, yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah,
Hell yeah. Like I wish someone had told me. I wouldn't have cared whether it was a stranger or a friend or
sure.
anything. I wish someone had told me sooner. And I'm a massive proponent
Of
of dragging
tell.
it out and saying, I know, and this is what I saw. And yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure I
I mean, the thing is, if they're trying to bullshit you, oh, it's an open, then tell. Then you're not saying anything that they
would.
don't already know. And if they don't know, well, then they know now, and they might not take action on that information, but they might later.
Yeah.
And you planted a seed, so good for you. You're not gonna enable somebody else's abuse.
Totally, totally. And I think the other thing that I wanted to say in terms of like how we change it, you were saying like we have to change the language. I also think that we have to make it more embarrassing and like shameful. And when we know in our circle, Dunbar's number of the 100 people that we know, if we know
Yeah.
someone socially who we know is a cheater and it's not a kind of I don't know, like one-off mistake and they immediately confessed and were sorry. And this is the thing with my fuckwit and so many fuckwits is they only got caught because they were found out. None of these
Mhm.
people are coming and to you and crying and saying, I'm so sorry I messed up and this was a mistake and I'll never do it again. They're getting found out, right? And I
Yeah.
think if we have these people in our social circles, it needs to be more socially embarrassing.
Hmm.
And people need to kind of go like, male friends around each other need to be like, that's really uncool. I don't support that. I don't really want to hang out with you for a while. Or, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it
Sure.
needs
There needs to be
to
social
be
sanction.
more of a pariah. If you're a cheater,
Yeah.
like, there need to be more consequences for you because there aren't any kind of like federal consequences, sadly. So there should be social consequences. And it's all too rare that there are any.
I look, I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, and I think though when you go through this, you really find out the people around you what their values are because there are some people who are going to like hate your fuckwit and ostracize them and call it out for what it is. And there are other people who are just gonna, reorder the deck chairs and then they're still invited to the barbecue. And it's maddening if you've been chumped because in a way it's like not being believed. It's
Yeah.
minimizing what you went through. Um, but that's a useful litmus test, I think. I say call your social register accordingly. If this,
I,
if these people don't share your values, that it's not okay to abuse my friend Nell. You're not my friend.
yeah.
Goodbye. Fuck
But it's
off.
not even like me. It's not even my
No,
fuckwit.
not
It's
you, but anybody.
for
But
my wedding next year. There are friends of my parents who I know there's been infidelity in their marriages, and I haven't invited the fuckwits.
Okay.
Which is like quite controversial. I've said like, you can come, you can't come. It's my wedding. Like this is a wedding. This is the day when we are promising to be faithful to each other, and you didn't do that, so you're not coming to my wedding because I believe in this. I'm trying to believe in this. So
I love that. I think that's great. Besides, it's your wedding. You get to make the
my wedding.
calls. Yeah.
You don't have to do
It's
that.
like not everybody deserves the privilege of being in your life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I guess you get from after being chumped is you really learn boundaries. Not everybody is cool enough to hang out with you. I mean, I think anybody who's been chumped, you really have to like not see it as this big powerful person hurt me. You have to see it as like this idiot, abused me and fuck them and they can't come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I admire you so much. I think it's so amazing what you do, and like you've become such a genius about all of it. And there's never any kind of person who calls into the podcast that you don't have such a. I'm always just so impressed by your answers, and I'm always confused.
Oh, stop. But thank you. I mean, thank you. I hope we'll be listening to your podcast. Do you want to plug it? Like, when are you going to be a podcast?
I don't have an official start date for the Sunday Girl podcast yet, but that's in the works. And yes, please find me on Substack or on my Instagram, or if you want to get in touch with me, there's a link tree on my Instagram where you can email me if you want to talk about this stuff.
We will put it all in the show notes, and I'm sure you're going to be like the next Chump champion. Thank you.
Thanks.
That wraps another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty. You want to leave us a mighty story or a fuckwit of the week submission? Check out our new website, tellmehowyourmighty.com. That's yours spelled YOURE. We've got all the episodes, show notes, links to our guests, and you can see the tea room where Sarah and I first met. If you enjoyed this episode, please review the podcast and follow us. Thanks. See you next week.